When the Caucasian HOA president stood up in federal court, that arrogance didn't just cost her the presidency. It triggered a $100,000 legal nightmare that drained the community reserve.
All she had to do was approve a standard $50 permit. Instead, she chose to trespass on my property, tow my vehicle, and threaten to foreclose. But she didn't know I had a secret weapon. A little-known federal regulation called the OTARD rule that turns the HOA's own bylaws into... Here is the story of how I didn't just beat the HOA. I completely dismantled them using their own rulebook.
I remember the day we got the keys. It felt like the finish line of a marathon I had been running for 10 years. My wife, Sarah, and I stood in the driveway of 402 Oakwood Lane, just staring at the place. It wasn't a mansion, but to us, it was a palace. It was a 2-story colonial with brick siding, a big oak tree in the front yard, and most importantly, no shared walls. We had spent the last decade in a cramped apartment downtown where the neighbors stomped on the ceiling at 2 a.m. and the smell of stale cigarettes seeped through the vents. This house was supposed to be our sanctuary. It was supposed to be the place where we could finally breathe. The real estate agent had warned us, just briefly, about the homeowners association. They're a bit involved, she had said with a tight smile. At the time, I brushed it off. I thought, how bad could it be? I'm a rule follower by nature. I mow my lawn, I don't leave trash cans out, and I don't throw wild parties. I figured an active HOA was actually a good thing. It protects property values, right? It keeps the neighborhood looking nice. I was naive. I didn't realize that for some people, an HOA isn't about property values. It's about power. It's about control. There was one specific thing I needed to check before we signed the papers, though. I have a hobby. Some people collect stamps, some people play golf. I am an amateur radio operator. I've been a ham since I was 15 years old. It's not just a hobby for me, it's a passion. I have equipment that can talk to the International Space Station. I help with emergency communications during hurricanes, when the cell towers go down. It's a vital part of who I am. So, before we closed on the house, I requested the CC and RS, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I sat at my kitchen table with a highlighter and read every single page of that 80-page document. I was looking for one thing: antenna restrictions. I found it on page 42. Section 8, paragraph C. It read, "External antennas and satellite dishes must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, prior to installation. Structures must not be visible from the street if possible and must be in harmony with the aesthetic of the community." I breathed a sigh of relief. The language was standard. It didn't say no antennas. It said they had to be approved and in harmony. That was fine. I wasn't planning on building a commercial broadcast tower. I just needed a modest vertical antenna, maybe 20 feet tall, mounted at the back of the house. You wouldn't even see it unless you were standing in my backyard looking up. We moved in on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had my application ready. I drew up a professional diagram. I included photos of the equipment. I even wrote a cover letter explaining that in the event of a natural disaster, my station could serve as a communication hub for the neighborhood. I thought they would appreciate it. I thought I was being a good neighbor. I walked the envelope down to the community clubhouse and dropped it in the slot marked ARC requests. I felt good. I felt responsible. 2 weeks went by. Silence. I started working on the garden in the meantime. I met a few neighbors. They were nice enough, though they seemed a little hesitant to talk for too long. One guy, Dave, who lived across the street, saw me pulling weeds and came over. He lowered his voice when he spoke. "You haven't met Patricia yet, have you?" he asked. "No," I said. "Who's Patricia?" Dave glanced toward the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one with the perfectly manicured roses that looked like they were measured with a ruler. "She's the board president, and the head of the ARC, and basically the sheriff of Oakwood Lane. Just stay on her good side." I laughed it off. "I'm sure it's fine. I just submitted a permit for a radio antenna. It's pretty standard stuff." Dave's face went pale. He actually took a step back. "You asked for an antenna?" He looked at me like I had just admitted to a felony. "Good luck, man. You're gonna need it." He walked away before I could ask what he meant. 3 days later, the letter arrived. It wasn't a standard business envelope. It was a thick, certified mail packet. My stomach gave a little lurch as I signed for it. I took it into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and sliced it open. Inside, there was my application. But it looked like it had bled to death. There was red ink everywhere. Circles, arrows, exclamation points. And right across the front page, a massive red stamp. Denied. Stapled to the front was a handwritten note. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. It read, "Absolutely not. This is a respectable community, not a trailer park. We do not allow ugly metal monstrosities that ruin the view. Do not ask again. If you install this, you will be fined heavily. Patricia." I stood there, staring at the paper. My hands started to shake. It wasn't fear, it was confusion mixed with a sudden flash of anger. Trailer park? Monstrosity. I went back to the bylaws. I reread Section 8, Paragraph C. Nowhere did it say antennas were banned. It said they needed approval. A blanket denial based on personal taste wasn't just rude. It was technically a violation of their own rules. They were supposed to work with homeowners, not insult them. I tried to calm down. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she thought I wanted to put a 50-foot rusty tower in the front yard. I just needed to explain it to her. I needed to show her the federal regulations that protect amateur radio operators. Surely, if she knew the law, she would back down. I found her email address on the community newsletter. I sat down and wrote a very polite, very professional email. Dear Patricia, I received your denial regarding my ARC application. I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the size and placement of the antenna. It will be located in the rear of the property and painted to blend in with the siding. Additionally, I would like to bring to your attention FCC regulations regarding reasonable accommodation for amateur radio communications. I would be happy to meet in person to discuss a compromise. I hit send. I expected a reply in a day or two. I got a reply in 11 minutes. There is no misunderstanding. I am the president of this association, and I decide what is in harmony with the community. Your toy radio is not in harmony. Read the bylaws again. The decision is final.
Do not email me about this again.
That was the moment. That was the exact second the switch flipped in my brain. If she had been polite, I might have let it go. If she had said, "Hey, we're really worried about property values, can we try an attic antenna instead?" I probably would have said yes. I wanted to be a good neighbor. I wanted peace. But she didn't want peace. She wanted submission. She called my federally licensed station a toy. She dismissed the law. She treated me like a naughty child. I looked at Sarah. She saw the look on my face. "What is it?" she asked softly. She said no. I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And she was nasty about it. "So, what do we do? Do we move?" Sarah asked, looking worried. She loved this house. The thought of leaving made her eyes well up. "No," I said. "We aren't moving anywhere. This is our house. We pay the mortgage. We pay the taxes. And we pay the HOA dues." I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled down a thick binder. It was my study guide for the extra class radio license, specifically the section on federal telecommunications law. "She thinks she has the power because she's the president of the board," I told Sarah, opening the binder. "She thinks the HOA bylaws are the highest law in the land, but she's wrong." I found the page I was looking for. 47C, F, R, Section 1. 4000, the OTARD rule. Over-the-air reception devices. It's a federal regulation that overrides any HOA restriction that unreasonably delays, prevents, or increases the cost of installing reception antennas. It was designed originally for satellite dishes, but it had been expanded. And there were other case laws specifically for ham radio that protected me from unreasonable restrictions. Patricia had just put in writing in an email that she was denying me based on aesthetics alone, without even trying to accommodate me. She had just handed me a loaded gun. "I'm going to install it," I said. Sarah's eyes went wide, but she said she'd fine us. "Let her," I said. "Every time she fines us, She breaks the law. Every time she threatens us, she digs the hole deeper. She wants a fight? Okay. I'm going to give her a war. The next morning, I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I called a contractor, and I told him to bring the concrete mixer. The installation was scheduled for a Saturday morning. I wanted to make sure I was home. I wanted to make sure I was standing right there in the driveway when it happened. The contractor, a guy named Mike who usually installs satellite dishes for sports bars, looked at the paperwork I had handed him. He looked at the house, then he looked at me. He scratched the back of his neck, shifting his weight uneasily. "You sure about this, buddy?" Mike asked. "I've done work in this neighborhood before. The lady who runs the HOA? She's intense. She yelled at me once for parking my van 2 inches onto the grass." "I know," I said, handing him a cup of coffee. "That's why I have the permit right here." I tapped the folder on the hood of his truck. It wasn't the HOA permit, of course. It was a copy of the FCC regulations I had printed out, highlighted in neon yellow. It was my shield. Or, at least, I hoped it was. "All right," Mike shrugged. "You're the boss. But if she comes out screaming, I'm taking my lunch break." He started the drill. The sound of a masonry drill biting into brick is loud. In a quiet suburban cul-de-sac on a Saturday morning, it sounds like machine gun fire. It took exactly 4 minutes. I was watching from the garage. I saw the front door of Patricia's house fly open. She didn't even put on shoes. She marched down her driveway in her slippers, wearing a floral bathrobe that billowed behind her like a cape. She was storming up the street before Mike had even finished the first hole. She stopped at the edge of my property line. To her credit, she knew better than to step onto the grass. She stood on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, her face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Excuse me," she shrieked. Her voice cracked. "What do you think you are doing?" Mike stopped the drill. He looked at me. I stepped out of the garage calm, holding my coffee mug. "Good morning, Patricia," I said. "Nice day for it." "Stop that noise immediately," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Mike. "You are not approved. I denied this. I sent you the letter myself. This is a violation of the covenants." "Actually," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "As I mentioned in my email, under federal law, I am allowed to install reception devices. We're proceeding." "I don't care about your federal law," she screamed. "I am the president of this association. You stop right now, or I will call the police." "Go ahead," I said. I'm sure the police would love to hear about a civil dispute regarding federal telecommunications jurisdiction. She stood there, mouth open, looking like a fish out of water. She wasn't used to people saying no. She was used to fear. She was used to people apologizing. She didn't call the police. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Snap, snap, snap. She took photos of Mike. She took photos of the van. She took photos of me. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. Then she turned around and stomped back to her house. Mike looked at me. "She seems nice." "Just get it up, Mike," I said. "Make sure it's sturdy." By noon, the antenna was up. It wasn't huge, just a white fiberglass vertical pole, about 20 feet high, mounted to the back chimney. From the street, you could barely see the tip of it peeking over the roofline. It was subtle. It was clean. But to Patricia, it might as well have been a burning flag. The first fine arrived on Monday. Violation notice offense. Unauthorized exterior structure. Fine, $50. 00. Remedy. Remove structure immediately. I didn't pay it. I took the paper, scanned it into a digital folder on my computer labeled evidence, and filed the hard copy in a fireproof box. 3 days later, another letter. Violation notice offense. Failure to comply. Fine, $100. 00. 2 days after that. Violation notice offense. Continued noncompliance. Fine, $250. 00. In 1 week, I had racked up $400 in fines. My wife was starting to panic. "Honey," she said one night, holding the latest letter. "This says if we don't pay, they can restrict our access to the common areas. They can ban us from the pool. And look at this part. It says legal action." "Let them," I said. I was sitting at the computer, logging every single interaction. Sarah, listened to me. This is a game of chicken. If we blink, we lose. If we pay one dime, we are admitting that their fines are legitimate. We are admitting that their rules supersede the law. We cannot pay. But how far does this go? She asked. It goes until they realize they made a mistake, I said. I decided to try one last diplomatic approach. The monthly HOA board meeting was that Thursday. I knew it would be a Shark Tank, but I needed to show on the record that I had tried to be reasonable. This was for the judge later on. Judges love it when you look like the peacemaker. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse. There were about 30 people there. Usually, nobody shows up to these things, but gossip travels fast in the suburbs. Everyone knew about the radio guy and the war with Patricia. They wanted to see the fireworks. Patricia sat at the head table, flanked by the treasurer and the secretary. They looked like a tribunal. When I walked in, the room went quiet. They went through the standard agenda. Budget for landscaping, complaints about people leaving trash cans out too long. Then, Patricia cleared her throat. New business, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. We have a serious issue with a resident at 402 Oakwood. Blatant disregard for the community rules. I raised my hand. You have 2 minutes, she said, checking her watch. State your name. I stood up. My name is your name. As the board is aware, the antenna installed at my home is protected under the FCC's OTARD rule. I have provided the documentation. The fines you are sending me are illegal. I am asking the board to rescind the fines and follow federal regulation. Patricia laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. This isn't Washington, D.C., sir. This is Willow Creek. We have standards here. If you didn't like the rules, you shouldn't have bought the house. The rules cannot violate the law, Patricia, I said calmly. Your 2 minutes are up, she snapped. Sit down. I'm just trying to save the association money, I said, remaining standing. Because if you continue this, the legal fees will be substantial. Are you threatening us? The treasurer, a man named Bob who looked like he slept in his suit, spoke up. We have a law firm on retainer, son. We have deeper pockets than you. You think you can sue us? We'll bury you in paperwork until you're bankrupt. Motion to enforce maximum penalties, Patricia said. Seconded, Bob said. Motion carries, Patricia said, slamming her gavel down. She looked at me with a smirk that made my blood boil. Remove the eyesore or face the consequences. Next item. I sat down. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I used a technique lawyers call gray rocking. You become as boring and unreactive as a rock. You give them nothing. No emotion, no anger, no outbursts. Because anger is what they want. Anger makes you look unstable. Silence makes you look dangerous. I walked out of that meeting with zero resolution, but I had exactly what I needed. I had witnesses. 30 neighbors saw the board refuse to even look at the federal law I tried to present. They saw the malice. The next month was brutal. The fines jumped to $500 a week. They towed my car from in front of my own house, claiming street parking violation, even though everyone else parked on the street. That cost me $300 to get back. They sent a letter to my mortgage lender, claiming I was in default of my HOA obligations, trying to trigger a problem with the bank. But I held the line. I didn't pay. I just kept filing the papers. Scan, save, file. Scan, save, file. Then 6 weeks into the war, the nuclear bomb dropped. I came home from work to find a process server waiting on my porch. He asked for my name. I gave it to him. He handed me a thick stack of papers bound with a heavy clip. You've been served, he said. I waited until I was inside to look at it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just another fine. Notice of lien and intent to foreclose. The HOA had placed a lien on my house for $4,500 in unpaid fines and legal fees. They were suing to force the sale of my home to pay the debt. They were trying to take my house. I stared at the paper. Most people would have collapsed. Most people would have written the check right then and there just to make the nightmare stop. Patricia was banking on that fear. She was banking on me breaking. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. She didn't know that for the last 6 weeks, I hadn't just been sitting around. I had been searching. And I had found the one lawyer in the state who hated HOAs more than I did. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number I had saved for this exact moment. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Henderson," I said. "They filed the lien." There was a pause on the other end. Then, I heard a sound I will never forget. The sound of a lawyer chuckling. "Good," he said. "They just walked right into the trap. Can you be in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? It's time to go on the offensive." I looked out the window at the antenna standing tall in the backyard. "I'll be there." Mr. Henderson's office did not look like the kind of place where high-stakes federal lawsuits were born. It was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a failing vape shop. The sign out front just said, "Henderson Law," in fading blue letters. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and older paper. There were stacks of files everywhere, on the desk, on the chairs, on the floor. It looked like a bomb had gone off in a library. But when Henderson walked in, you knew immediately why he was the guy to call. He was about 60, wearing a suit that looked like he'd slept in it, but his eyes were razor-sharp. He didn't shake my hand. He just pointed to a chair that he had to clear a stack of law books off of first. "Let me see the lien," he said. I handed him the document. He put on a pair of reading glasses that were held together with tape, and he read. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. The only sound in the room was the hum of a window air conditioner and the turning of pages. Finally, he looked up. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "They really are stupid, aren't they?" he said. "They're aggressive," I said. "Patricia wants me out." "No, son. Aggressive is fine. Stupid is expensive," Henderson said. He tossed the file onto his desk. "See, if they had just fined you, we'd be fighting in small claims court. It's messy, it's low stakes. But by filing a lien? By threatening foreclosure on a debt that is based on an illegal fine? That's slander of title." He leaned forward. "And because they are punishing you for exercising a federally protected right under the FCC statutes, this isn't a neighborhood spat anymore. This is a federal civil rights violation. We aren't going to the county courthouse. We're going to the district court." "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means we sue them," Henderson said. "We don't wait for them to foreclose. We file a complaint immediately. We ask for a declaratory judgment that the antenna is legal. We ask for an injunction to remove the lien. And then..." He paused for dramatic effect. "Then we ask for damages. Actual damages. Punitive damages. And legal fees. By the time we're done, that $4,500 lien they put on your house is going to cost them 6 figures. I felt a weight lift off my chest. "So, what do we do first?" "First," Henderson said, pulling a yellow legal pad toward him, "we open the floodgates. It's called discovery. If they want to sue you, they have to show their cards. I want to see every email, every text message, and every meeting minute where your name was mentioned. I want to know exactly what was going through Patricia's head when she decided to ignore the United States government." He scribbled something on the pad, ripped the page off, and handed it to me. "Go home. Don't talk to Patricia. Don't talk to the neighbors. Let me do the talking." The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. Henderson filed the lawsuit. The HOA's lawyer, a guy named Miller who usually just handled simple collections, probably spit out his coffee when he got the paperwork. He tried to get it dismissed immediately. He argued that I hadn't exhausted administrative remedies. Fancy talk for he didn't ask us nicely enough. The federal judge denied their motion in 24 hours. That was the first crack in the dam. The judge basically said, "The plaintiff cites a specific federal statute. You can't dismiss this. We are going to trial." Then came the discovery phase. This is the part of the legal system that movies usually skip because it's boring paperwork, but Henderson told me it's where the war is actually won. He sent a demand to the HOA board for all internal communications regarding my property. They fought it, of course. They claimed attorney-client privilege. They claimed executive session privacy. But Henderson was like a pit bull. He argued that since the board members were acting outside the scope of their authority, by breaking the law, they had no privilege. The judge agreed. He ordered them to hand over the emails. I was at work when Henderson called me. "You need to come in," he said.
His voice was different this time.
It wasn't the confident, lawyer voice. It was quieter. Serious. "Is it bad?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "No," he said. I've been doing this 30 years, and I've never seen people this arrogant. Just come in." I drove straight to his office. He had a stack of printed emails on his desk. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "We got their internal emails," Henderson said. "Patricia and the treasurer, Bob. They've been emailing back and forth about you since the day you submitted the application." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Read the highlighted part." I picked it up. It was an email from Patricia to Bob, dated 2 days after I installed the antenna. From Patricia, President, to Bob, Treasurer, Subject. "The radio guy, I don't care what the federal law says. I checked with Miller, and he said it's a gray area, but we can probably bully him into taking it down before it goes to court. These people always fold if you threaten their credit rating. Let's hit him with the max fines. If he doesn't pay, we lien the house. I want him gone. He doesn't fit the profile of this neighborhood anyway. Let's make his life hell until he moves." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She admits it," I whispered. "She admits she knew about the law and decided to bully me anyway." "Keep reading," Henderson said. I picked up the next sheet. This one was from Bob. From Bob, Treasurer, to Patricia, President, Subject. The radio guy, just be careful. If we lien the house, we need to make sure the insurance covers us if he sues. Does the policy cover willful acts? From Patricia, President, to Bob, Treasurer, who cares? He won't sue. He's a nobody. Just file the lien. I want to see the look on his face when the foreclosure notice hits. I put the paper down. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. It was pure cold rage. "She planned it," I said. "It wasn't about the rules. It was personal." "It's better than personal," Henderson said. "It's malice. In the eyes of the law, this is the difference between a mistake and a crime. If they had just been wrong about the law, that's negligence. But this, acknowledging the law and deciding to break it to harm you, that opens the door for punitive damages." He leaned back in his creaky chair. "I sent a copy of these emails to their insurance carrier this morning," Henderson said with a grin. "Why?" I asked. "Because," he said, "HOA liability insurance covers accidents. It covers mistakes. It does not cover intentional illegal acts. When the insurance company sees that Patricia did this on purpose, knowing it was risky, they're going to deny coverage." "What does that mean?" "It means," Henderson said, tapping the table, "that when we win, and we will win, the insurance company isn't writing the check. The HOA is. And since the HOA doesn't have $100,000 sitting in a checking account, the money is going to have to come from somewhere else." "Where?" I asked. "The neighbors," Henderson said. "A special assessment. Patricia just spent everyone's money." I sat back, processing it. The trap had snapped shut. But it wasn't just catching Patricia anymore. It was going to catch the whole neighborhood. "Is there any way to avoid that?" I asked. "I don't want to hurt the neighbors. Dave across the street is a nice guy." "The only way to avoid it was for Patricia to follow the law 3 months ago," Henderson said. "The train has left the station, kid. Now we just watch the crash." He stood up and grabbed his briefcase. "The settlement conference is next Tuesday," he said. "Wear a tie. And don't say a word. Just watch Patricia's face when I explain that her insurance company has abandoned her." I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun. The world looked the same, but it felt different. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the match, and Patricia was standing in a room full of gasoline. I went home. I parked in the driveway. I looked at the for sale sign on the house next door. Then I looked at Patricia's house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Her car was in the driveway. I wondered if she knew yet. I wondered if her lawyer had called her to tell her that her private emails were now public record. I walked into my backyard and looked up at my antenna. It stood tall against the blue sky, swaying slightly in the breeze. "You're staying right there," I said to it. I went inside, kissed Sarah on the forehead, and told her, "It's going to be okay. Better than okay." "Did we lose?" she asked, seeing the intensity in my eyes. "No," I said. "We just won. They just don't know it yet." The settlement conference took place in a windowless room on the 4th floor of the federal courthouse. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom you see on TV with the wood paneling and the jury box. It was sterile. Gray carpet, gray walls, and a long, oval table that looked like it had hosted 1,000 arguments before ours. We arrived 10 minutes early. Henderson was wearing a different tie. This one had little gavels on it, but the same rumpled suit. He looked relaxed, almost bored. He set his briefcase on the table and started arranging his papers in neat little stacks. "Remember," he whispered to me as the door opened. "Poker face. Whatever they say, you don't react. If they insult you, you look at the wall. If they offer you money, you look at me." I nodded. My heart was thumping a steady rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Then they walked in. Patricia led the charge, of course. She was wearing a sharp navy blazer and pearls, clutching her purse like a shield. She didn't look at me. She marched to the other side of the table and sat down with a huff. Behind her came Bob, the treasurer. He looked terrible, pale, sweating, eyes darting around the room. He looked like a man who knew he was walking to the gallows. Finally, their lawyer, Mr. Miller. He looked exhausted. He was a young guy, probably used to handling noise complaints and overdue dues. He wasn't ready for a federal civil rights case. He carried a stack of files that seemed to weigh 50 pounds. A court-appointed mediator sat at the head of the table. "All right," he said, opening a folder. "We are here to see if we can resolve Case 24 Civil 009, Homeowner versus Willow Creek HOA, without the need for a full trial. Mr. Miller, you represent the defendants. Why don't you start?" Miller cleared his throat. He shuffled his papers.
"Thank you," Miller said.
"Look, we believe this whole thing has blown out of proportion. The association has a duty to uphold aesthetic standards. However," he glanced at Patricia, who was staring daggers at him. "However, in the spirit of compromise, the board is willing to make an offer." He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Henderson didn't pick it up. He just looked at it. "We are willing to waive 50% of the accumulated fines," Miller said. "And we will allow the homeowner to keep the antenna up for 6 months to find a new location, provided it is moved to the attic afterwards. In exchange, the homeowner drops the lawsuit." Patricia nodded firmly. "It's a generous offer," she said, breaking the rule about clients not speaking. "More than he deserves." I felt the anger flare up in my chest. Generous? They had tried to steal my house, and now they were offering to let me pay half the fines? I looked at Henderson. He hadn't moved. He was staring at the paper like it was a dirty napkin. "Mr. Miller," Henderson said softly, "are you aware of the evidentiary discovery we submitted last week?" Miller sighed. "We've seen the emails, Mr. Henderson. We argue that they are privileged discussions regarding enforcement strategy." "They establish malice," Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave. "They establish that your client, Patricia, specifically targeted my client because she didn't like him. She admitted to ignoring the law to bully him. That takes this out of the realm of a contract dispute and into the realm of willful harassment." "That's for a jury to decide," Miller said, though he didn't sound confident. "True," Henderson said. He finally picked up the paper Miller had slid over. He crumpled it into a ball and dropped it on the floor. "We aren't here to negotiate fines, Mr. Miller. My client owes $0. The fines were illegal from day one. We are here to discuss the damages your clients owe him." Patricia scoffed. "We aren't paying him a dime. This is ridiculous. I want this over with. Foreclose on the house if he doesn't pay." Henderson turned his chair slowly to face Patricia directly. It was the first time he had acknowledged her existence. "Patricia," he said, "do you know how insurance works?" "Excuse me," she snapped. "The HOA carries directors' and officers' liability insurance," Henderson explained, sounding like a patient schoolteacher. "It protects board members from personal liability when they make mistakes. It pays for the lawyers. It pays for the settlements." "I know that," she said. That's why we're here. The insurance is handling it. Henderson reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a document with a blue cover page. This, Henderson said, sliding it across the table to Miller, is a copy of the letter I received this morning from your insurance carrier. I assume they sent it to you as well, but maybe it's still in the mail. Miller grabbed the document. He read the first paragraph. His face went gray. He flipped the page. He read the conclusion. He closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. What is it? Bob asked, his voice trembling. What does it say? Miller looked at his clients. It's a denial of coverage letter, Bob. What does that mean? Patricia demanded. It means, Henderson interjected, that the insurance company has reviewed the emails where you admitted to breaking the law on purpose. They are citing the intentional acts exclusion clause. They are dropping you. They are not paying for your defense. They are not paying any settlement. And if we go to trial and win, they are not paying the judgment. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Patricia looked at Miller. He's lying. Tell him he's lying. He's not lying, Patricia, Miller whispered. If malice is proven, and those emails are pretty damning, the insurance walks away. They aren't going to cover a willful violation of federal law. So, Bob stammered. So, who pays? Henderson smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. The association pays, Henderson said. And since I've reviewed your financials, I know the association only has about $12,000 in the operating account. You don't have enough. So we're bankrupt?
Bob asked.
Oh, no, Henderson said. You're an HOA. You have the power to levy assessments. To pay the judgment, you'll have to issue a special assessment to every single home in Willow Creek. You're going to have to ask every one of your neighbors for a check to cover the cost of Patricia's little power trip. Patricia sat back in her chair. She looked like she had been punched in the gut. The arrogance was gone. The queen of the neighborhood facade cracked. She realized, in that moment, that she wasn't untouchable. She was about to become the most hated woman in the zip code. Unless, Henderson said, leaning in, unless we settle right now. What do you want? Miller asked, his voice defeated. Henderson pulled out a second sheet of paper. He laid it flat on the table. 1, Henderson said. Immediate dismissal of the lien and all fines. Deleted from the record. Miller nodded. Done. 2, Henderson continued. A permanent injunction preventing the HOA from interfering with my client's amateur radio operation, provided it stays within FCC safety limits. He can put up a 40-foot tower if he wants. You can't say a word. Patricia opened her mouth to object, but Miller kicked her under the table. She shut her mouth. 3, Henderson said. Payment of legal fees and damages. How much? Bob asked. Henderson looked at the ceiling, doing a mental calculation. Well, my hourly rate is $450. We've filed a federal complaint. We've done discovery. Plus the harassment my client suffered. The stress. The slander of title. He looked back down at them. $100,000. That's insane. Patricia yelled. We don't have that kind of money. Then I guess we go to trial, Henderson said, starting to pack up his briefcase. And when a jury sees those emails, they might award us triple that. And then you'll have to explain to the neighbors why they each owe $3,000 instead of $1,000. He stood up. I stood up with him. We'll give you an hour to discuss it, Henderson said. We're going to get some lunch. We walked out of the room. As the heavy door clicked shut behind us, I heard Bob's voice rise in a panic. You said this was under control, Patricia. You said. He was a nobody. Shut up, Bob, she screamed back. We walked down the hallway to the vending machines. Henderson bought a bag of peanuts and a Diet Coke. He looked at me and winked. They're going to take it, he said. How do you know? I asked. Because Bob is a coward, Henderson said, munching on a peanut. He's doing the math right now. He knows that if they fight this, he's personally on the hook too. He's going to force her hand. But where will they get the money? I asked. You said the reserves are low. They'll drain the reserves to zero, Henderson said. And then they'll have to assess the neighbors for the rest. It's going to be ugly, but it's not your problem anymore. 30 minutes later, Miller came out into the hallway. He looked like he had aged 10 years in half an hour. We accept, he said. We'll draft the agreement. Check will be issued within 30 days. I felt a wave of relief, so strong my knees almost buckled. It was over. The lien was gone. The fines were gone. And I was walking away with a check that would pay off my lawyer and leave me with enough cash to buy the best radio setup money could buy. But the real victory wasn't the money. The real victory happened 2 weeks later. The check cleared. The lien was removed. Henderson took his cut, which was substantial, but he earned every penny, and I deposited the rest. Then, the letter went out to the neighborhood. I didn't write it. The board had to write it. It was the notice of special assessment. I was in my driveway washing my car when Dave, the neighbor from across the street, walked over. He was holding a piece of paper. He looked furious. Did you get this? Dave asked, waving the paper. Get what? I asked, playing innocent. The HOA, Dave said. They're hitting every house with a $1,200 fee. It says it's for unanticipated legal expenses due to board litigation. $1,200. I have to pay for my kids' braces this month. Wow, I said. That's terrible. I wonder what happened. I heard rumors, Dave said, lowering his voice. I heard Patricia got into a fight with someone and lost. I heard she messed up big time. Is that so? I said. Yeah, Dave said. There's an emergency meeting tonight at the clubhouse. A recall vote. We're kicking her out. You coming? I smiled. I looked up at my antenna, shining in the sun. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. The atmosphere in Willow Creek changed overnight. Before the special assessment letter went out, people were annoyed by Patricia. They rolled their eyes at her emails about trash cans and grass height. They gossiped about her at the mailboxes. But they tolerated her. They figured she was just a busybody with too much time on her hands, and hey, at least she kept the neighborhood clean. But money changes everything. When you ask a family to cough up $1,200 out of nowhere, money they had saved for a vacation, or car repairs, or Christmas gifts, annoyance turns into fury. The Saturday before the emergency meeting, the neighborhood felt like a powder keg. I saw small groups of neighbors standing in driveways, clutching the assessment letters, pointing at Patricia's house. There were no friendly waves. There was just tension. I kept a low profile. I mowed my lawn. I waved to Dave. I didn't gloat. I didn't put up a sign that said, "I told you so." I didn't have to. The letter from the board had been vague, citing legal costs, but rumors were flying. People knew I had been involved in a lawsuit, but they didn't know the details. They didn't know why the HOA had lost. That changed at the meeting. The clubhouse was packed. And I mean packed. Usually, these meetings had 5 people. Tonight, there were over 100. People were standing in the back. People were sitting on the floor. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with the body heat and the anger in the room. Patricia sat at the head table, but she looked smaller than usual. She wasn't wearing her blazer. She was wearing a cardigan, wrapped tight around her. Bob, the treasurer, looked like he was about to vomit. Miller, the lawyer, wasn't even there. He had wisely decided to skip this one. Patricia banged the gavel. It sounded weak against the murmur of the crowd. "Order," she called out. "Order, please. Cut the crap, Patricia," someone yelled from the back. It was Mrs. Higgins, an 80-year-old woman who usually brought cookies to the meetings. "Tell us why we owe $1,200. "Please," Patricia said, her voice trembling slightly. "We are here to explain the assessment. Due to unforeseen litigation regarding a property dispute, the association was forced to settle a lawsuit. The reserves were depleted, and under the bylaws, we must assess the membership to cover the difference." "What lawsuit?" a man in the front row demanded. "Is this about the radio guy?"
He pointed at me.
Every head in the room turned. Patricia seized the opportunity. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Yes," she said. "He sued the association. He refused to follow the rules, and then he sued us for a fortune. He is the reason you all have to pay. If you want to be mad at someone, Be mad at him. It was a smart move. She tried to turn the mob against me. For a second, it felt like it might work. I saw a few angry glares. I stood up. I didn't need to shout. The room went silent instantly. That's not exactly true, is it, Patricia? I said calmly. You sued us, she screeched. You took our money. I sued you because you broke federal law, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stack of paper. It was the same document Henderson had used to crush them in the settlement conference, the insurance denial letter. Neighbors, I said, turning to face the room. The HOA has insurance. We pay thousands of dollars a year for a policy that covers lawsuits. If this was a normal dispute, the insurance would have paid for the lawyers. It would have paid the settlement. You wouldn't be paying a dime. I held the paper up. But the insurance company refused to pay. Does anyone want to know why? Why? Dave shouted. Because, I said, looking back at Patricia, the insurance policy does not cover intentional illegal acts or malice. The insurance company read the board's internal emails. They saw that Patricia and Bob knew what they were doing was against the law, but they did it anyway because they wanted to, and I quote, make my life hell. A gasp went through the room. I have the emails right here. I continued. Patricia admitted that her goal was to bully a resident. That is why the insurance denied the claim. You aren't paying $1,200 because I sued. You are paying $1,200 because Patricia decided her personal grudge was more important than the financial safety of this neighborhood. I walked over to Dave and handed him the stack of papers. Passed them around. Pandemonium broke out. People were grabbing the papers, reading the highlighted sections, and then looking at the head table with pure hatred. You admitted it, someone yelled. You knew it was illegal? Another shouted. Patricia tried to bang the gavel again, but nobody was listening. She stood up to speak, but she was drowned out by a chorus of boos. Then a man I didn't know, a guy in a business suit who looked like he negotiated contracts for a living, walked to the front of the room. I make a motion, he boomed. Immediate recall of the board president and treasurer for breach of fiduciary duty and gross negligence. Second, Mrs. Higgins yelled. All in favor? The man asked. Every single hand in the room went up. Even the secretary at the table raised her hand. Motion carries, the man said. Patricia, Bob, get out. Patricia looked around the room. She looked for an ally. She looked for anyone who would stand up for her. But there was no one. The fear she had used to control the neighborhood had evaporated, replaced by the one thing she couldn't fight, the collective wallet of the community. She didn't say a word. She gathered her purse, stood up, and walked out the side door. She didn't look back. Bob followed her, head down, practically running. The meeting didn't end there. The neighbors spent the next hour electing a temporary board. They elected the guy in the suit as the new president. He immediately approached me. We can't undo the assessment, he said, shaking my hand. The money is gone. But on behalf of the association, I apologize. We're going to review the bylaws to make sure they actually comply with the law. That's all I ever wanted, I said. The aftermath was swift. Patricia put her house on the market 2 weeks later. She couldn't handle the shame. Nobody spoke to her. When she walked to her mailbox, people turned their backs. The Queen of Willow Creek had become a pariah. She moved out in a hurry. The last I heard, she moved to a condo in Florida. I pity the residents of that building. As for me, I had a check for $100,000 minus legal fees, burning a hole in my pocket. And I had a court order that said the HOA couldn't interfere with my station as long as I followed FCC safety rules. I decided to treat myself. I called Mike, the contractor, back out. Remember that little vertical antenna? I asked him. Yeah. Take it down, I said. Mike looked worried. Did they win? No, I smiled. We're upgrading. I used a chunk of the settlement money to buy a Roan 25G tower. It's a triangular steel lattice structure. It's not 20 feet tall. It's 40 feet tall. It's anchored in concrete. It has a directional beam antenna on top that looks like a giant aluminum skeleton. Is it ugly? To some people, maybe. To me, it's beautiful. It represents freedom. It represents the law. And the best part? It's perfectly visible from the street. When the new neighbors moved into Patricia's old house, they came over to introduce themselves. They were a nice young couple. They looked at the massive tower in my backyard. "Wow," the husband said. "That is impressive. Does the HOA allow that?" I took a sip of my coffee and looked up at the aluminum gleaming in the sun. "Yeah," I said. "They don't have a choice."